Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 21st January 2021. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. Now, in our weekly series of mains question assignment from the Daily News Simplified, the question for today's assignment is highlight the challenges faced by India in its pursuit of the neighborhood first policy. What are the steps that India is taking to counter these challenges? This question has been created from the DNS of 27 December 2020 from the discussion titled India and its Neighborhood Policy. You might first watch this discussion before writing your answer. And in the description of this video, you will find a link for this mains weekly question. Further, you can type the answer in the comment box or you can click the image in a JPG file and send your answers to us in the comment of this question that has been posted on the eLearn platform. And all those students who will send their answers by Saturday will get the evaluation and feedback from the Rao's IAS teachers. So let us start the discussion now. Now, this article on page number 7 is basically related to the China's aggressive stance in the recent time. So, in this line, the author analyzes as to how good is China's preparedness for a war, or how well are the Chinese armed forces prepared to handle a war. So, in this regard, the president of China, Xi Jinping, has been undertaking reforms in the armed forces. So the author has analyzed the weak points or the vulnerabilities in these reforms that China is trying to undertake. So in this regard, the author has also analyzed as to why is China trying to restructure or modernize its armed forces. So let us look at all these points here. Now we see that China is having a renewed focus on restructuring its armed forces. And this is highlighted by some of the steps that have been taken by China in the recent times. So, for example, the President Xi Jinping of China has instructed his armed forces to be combat ready to act at any second. So, this clearly highlights that China is preparing itself or is trying to prepare itself for any eventualities as far as a war is concerned. Secondly, the President of China, Xi Jinping, has also issued new rules for the selection, training, and promotion of military personnel. Also, he has unveiled an ambitious vision for the restructuring of Chinese armed forces by introducing some of the new concepts like the Joint Theater Command, which will aim at aligning various regional threats in a particular region. Now, this Joint Theater Command is a concept that has been borrowed by China from the United States of America, and it basically highlights the integration of military, air force, as well as navy in a particular region. So basically, China is trying to restructure its army on the basis of the Joint Theater Command concept of America. Also, the armed forces are now being infused with new technologies, which will include artificial intelligence, etc. And this is known as the new concept of intelligentsia warfare. So basically, all these steps or all these announcements that have been done by China in the recent times related to modernization of its army and also the introduction of Joint Theater Command concept based on the American army highlight that China is having a renewed focus on restructuring its armed forces. Now, why is China doing this? So let us look at the reasons as to why China is having a renewed focus on restructuring its armed forces. Now, one of the reasons is the change of presidency in the United States of America. Second reason is that China is increasingly getting involved in conflicts across the region. And thirdly, recent performance of China in its Western Theater Command has not been up to the mark or has been poor. Now, as far as the change of presidency in the United States of America is concerned, China is trying to signal its confidence and military preparedness and is ready to respond to any new US policy which deals with the freedom of navigation operations, especially when it comes to South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. We already know that China has been aggressively pursuing its interests in the South China Sea and it is claiming territorial and sovereign rights in the South China Sea, ignoring the sovereign rights of other countries which surround the South China Sea. So, accordingly, if the change of presidency highlights or frames any policy on the freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait, China is showing that it is ready or it has military preparedness and it is trying to signal a confidence against any such US policy that comes into force. Secondly, we know that China is aggressively pursuing disputed territories in the South China Sea and Taiwan, and also we note that China has been involved in conflicts with India at the line of actual control in the Ladakh region, especially in the Galwan Valley. And due to these increased conflicts that China is getting itself involved into, China is trying to prepare itself for any eventualities. And these aggressive stances that have been taken by China of late have also increased the chances of military conflicts. Thirdly, China has performed very poorly as far as the performance of its Western Theater Command is concerned. In this, China has suffered high number of casualties in the June 15 Galwan Valley clash, where 20 Indian soldiers also died. Also, recently, the Indian army had captured strategic mountains, for example, Razangla and other passes in the Ladakh region. So, this highlights that Indian army is more acclimatized to the terrain in this particular region and where the Chinese Western Theater Command has not performed up to the mark. So, all these events are the reasons for China's aggressive posture, and that is why China is trying to restructure its army on modern lines. Now, why did China perform badly as far as the performance of its Western Theater Command is concerned? So, the author highlights that the Western Theater Command of China has been facing problems of acclimatization of its soldier in that particular region. We see that the Western Theater Command is associated with the Ladakh issue, and this is one of the most difficult terrain to survive in. And accordingly, the Chinese soldiers were not very well prepared to perform in this particular rough terrain. And accordingly, recently it has been highlighted that 10,000 troops from this Western Theater Command were moved to lower locations for recuperation or getting acclimatized with the terrain. That is, they were not comfortable on such high positions or locations in the Ladakh region. Further, we see that China is trying to modernize its army through the introduction of new technologies, aircrafts, etc. However, the Chinese force has been struggling to manage the joint training as far as the training in the joint theater commands, which include the army, air force, and navy, is concerned. Also, the arrival of new fighter and stealth aircrafts, rockets, and artificial intelligence based drones and other equipments is making it difficult for Chinese forces to manage many things at a one particular time. Also, the failure of Western Theater Command is also highlighted by the recent replacement that has been done regarding the commander of Western Theater Command. So now, even though China is trying to pursue the modernization goals for handling any of the eventualities that it faces because of the recent aggressive posture that China has taken, let us look at what are the issues that the Chinese armed forces are facing currently. Firstly, the author highlights that the promotions in the Chinese armed forces were traditionally based on political loyalty of the officers and their connections with the ruling Chinese Communist Party. And the personal background of the officers also mattered when it came to promotions in the Chinese armed forces. That means there was lack of priority that was given to the merit in the promotions in Chinese armed forces. So this is one of the critical issues as far as the Chinese armed forces are concerned. Secondly, the president of China, Xi Jinping, has changed the posture of Chinese armed forces from being defensive force to an offensive force. And this was clearly highlighted when Chinese army got involved with the Indian army in the Ladakh region in the Galwan Valley. And that was seen as an aggressive or offensive posture that was taken by the Chinese armed forces. Further, the author highlights that the training of Chinese armed forces to adapt with the American concept of Joint Theater Command and the introduction of new technologies like the artificial intelligence and the intelligentsia based warfare would not be very easy for the Chinese armed forces. Now, besides this, there are various structural problems also present in the Chinese armed forces. So, as far as the structural issues in the Chinese armed forces are concerned, the Chinese armed forces are political in nature and they are not very professional as far as their performance in the army is concerned. Secondly, the personnel that comprises the Chinese army are not very qualified and they come with low levels of education and are also not very highly motivated. And towards this, the author highlights that it is basically a result of the one child policy that the China has followed in the recent times. And we note that China has the largest population in the world in the present times. So, in order to control its increasing population, China followed this one child policy. And under this one child policy, a couple could only have one child. And due to this, the generation that was born under this one child policy was seen as a pampered generation and they were not very highly motivated to join the armed forces. Or the parents of these children did not want their child to join the armed forces, which are seen as risky. Secondly, in the Chinese armed forces, there is lack of a tough mindset or battlefield experience. And China presently also faces a serious problem of brain drain. And that is because of rising educational levels in China. And the most qualified people from China are moving out of the country as far as the economic opportunities are concerned. And because of collectively these issues that are present in the Chinese armed forces, the author says that these limitations will certainly affect the performance of Chinese armed forces in a war with any other professional army. And this was clearly seen when China got itself involved with the Indian army in the Ladakh region. And in this scuffle that happened in the Ladakh region, although India lost 20 of its soldiers, the Chinese army faced more number of casualties. Secondly, the Chinese Western Theatre Command was not acclimatized for the difficult terrain of Ladakh. So these are the points that have been highlighted in this article as far as the Chinese plans of modernizing and restructuring its army is concerned. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 3 reads that the biomedical waste sites must get authorization, and in this regard, National Green Tribunal has asked the Central Pollution Control Board to ensure the compliance that these biomedical waste sites have an authorization. Now, this particular aspect related to various rules that have been formed by the Government of India regarding biomedical waste, e-waste or solid waste are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view in the topics environment and ecology. So in this regard, let us first look at the way in which questions have been asked from this particular aspect in the preliminary examination, and after that we'll go through the details of the biomedical waste rules of 2018 and how are they important improvement over the biomedical waste rules of 2016. And also, what are the key aspects of these biomedical waste rules 2018 which can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, if you look at these two questions, they were both asked in the year 2019 in the preliminary examination. The first question was related to solid waste management rules 2016 and second question was related to extended producer responsibility as being an important feature of which of these following waste rules. So as far as this first question is concerned, if you look at the options, you will find that details of these rules have been asked in the preliminary examination. So if you are not aware of the rules in such kind of questions, you might not be able to answer these questions. So the correct answer here was that the rules provide for exact and elaborate criteria for the identification of sites for landfills and waste processing facilities. As far as this question is concerned, the extended producer responsibility principle has been introduced as an important feature of the e-waste management rules of 2011. So this highlights that such rules related to waste management are very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in this regard, let us look at the key aspects of the biomedical waste rules of 2018. So firstly, these biomedical waste rules 2018 apply to all the persons who generate, collect, receive, store, transport, treat, dispose or handle any kind of biomedical waste. And these rules have been formed under the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. So this particular aspect becomes very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, that these rules are formed under the Environment Protection Act 1986. Now, earlier also, the government of India has come out with various rules relating to the biomedical waste handling. And in this line, the new rules of 2018 are the amendments that have been introduced in the biomedical waste management rules of 2016. So, the first aim is to reduce the infectious or hazardous nature of the waste. We note that the biomedical waste at times comprises of various chemicals and the drugs that are administered to the patients. So that is why these wastes that are generated during the medical procedure can be hazardous and infectious for other people. Also, we note that during COVID 19, a lot of biomedical waste has been generated in the form of PPE kits or used masks or gloves, etc. And that is why handling of such waste is very important as far as the safety of health of population is concerned. Second objective is to reduce the volume of such kind of waste. Thirdly, it aims at preventing misuse or abuse of such waste. Also, it aims to ensure the occupational safety and health of the medical practitioners as well as the patients. And the ultimate aim is to recycle such kind of waste. The next question that comes into our mind is that to which all categories does the biomedical waste rules apply? So these rules apply to hospitals and blood banks, to nursing homes, dispensaries, veterinary institutions, and animal houses. So this is a very important aspect, that it also applies to animal slaughterhouses, etc. Further, it applies to pathological laboratories, clinical establishments, research and educational institutions, health camps, medical camps, vaccination camps, blood donation camps, forensic research labs, first aid rooms of schools, and Ayush hospitals as well. So basically, it is a very elaborate kind of application of these rules, and clearly, the unique aspect is that it is also applicable to animal houses. Now, what are the components of these rules? So, they include 18 rules in all, and they have 4 schedules and 5 forms are required as far as the compliance is concerned. In the schedule 1, there is color coding for biomedical waste. Also, there are rules for collection, treatment, and disposal. Second schedule deals with the standard for treatment and disposal. Third schedule relates to the prescribed authorities and responsibilities, and fourth schedule relates to the labels for biomedical waste containers and bags. And the overall authority of regulation of these biomedical wastes have been given to the State Pollution Control Board. So in this line, the occupier or the operator of biomedical waste applies to the State Pollution Control Board, and in this line they grant the authorization to such bodies or operators. Nextly, the waste under the biomedical waste rules needs to be categorized in 3 categories. First is non-infectious, infectious, and hazardous. Now, the number of categories in which the biomedical waste has been categorized by these biomedical waste rules is also very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So here you should note that there are different categories, and which include the 5 categories in which human anatomical waste or any body parts or organs, animal waste, microbiology and biotechnology waste, waste sharps, and discarded medicines and cytotoxic drugs are also included. Further, different solid waste and liquid waste and incineration ash and chemical waste have also been included. So in all, the biomedical waste has been categorized in 10 categories. This is a very important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view, that the biomedical waste has been categorized into 10 categories. Now, as far as the segregation of this biomedical waste is concerned, it is segregated into 4 parts. First one is plastic, second one is non-plastic, third one is sharp biomedical equipments, and the fourth ones are puncture-proof waste that is generated in the biomedical procedures. And besides the biomedical waste, there is general waste that is generated in hospitals or medical facilities. So firstly, the waste is categorized into 2 parts, biomedical waste in general, and the biomedical waste is then categorized into 4 parts. So this information that the biomedical waste is categorized into 4 parts is very important for us. Next important thing is the process of flow of biomedical waste or how it requires to be handled. So there are 6 steps involved in such handling of biomedical waste. First step is the generation of this biomedical waste. Once it is generated, it is segregated. So segregation is an important step. Then after segregating the biomedical waste into the 4 categories that we have learned in the last slide, this biomedical waste needs to be stored, then it needs to be collected, transported, and finally it is treated and disposed in the last step. So these are the 6 steps that are involved. Then as far as the segregation of the biomedical waste is concerned, it is segregated at source into 4 parts. So the first container is the yellow bin and it contains contaminated non-plastic waste. Second one is the red bin. It contains contaminated plastic waste. And then there are black bins which include uncontaminated general waste. And finally, the 4th category is the glass sharps or the sharp waste, which can include syringes or glass equipments, etc. So these are the 4 categories in which the waste needs to be segregated at the source. Finally, the containers or the bags which are used for carrying biomedical waste needs to have these symbols. First is the biohazard symbol and second is the cytotoxic hazard symbol. So these are the mandatory symbols that needs to be used for containers of the biomedical waste and they have been included in the schedule 3. Now, as far as the treatment of the biomedical waste is concerned, the rules highlight that such kind of waste needs to be handled in a manner as prescribed by the World Health Organization's Guide on Safe Management of Waste from Healthcare Activities and the WHO Blue Book of 2014. So basically this aspect that the handling of the biomedical waste is based on the WHO's guidelines can be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Then the rules talk about phasing out of chlorinated plastic bags and it excludes the blood bags at the present moment. So this is also an important aspect. So overall, all the aspects that we have discussed here can be very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 8 is related to the Niti Aayog's Innovation Index and this article reads that Karnataka has topped this Niti Aayog's Innovation Index. So let us learn a few important facts related to the Innovation Index from our preliminary examination point of view. Now the first thing that you need to learn is that India Innovation Index is released by Niti Aayog. Sometimes in the preliminary examination questions are asked related to the organization which releases these indices. And that is why it is important to know that the Niti Aayog releases or calculates the India Innovation Index. Now, what is the goal of creating such an index? So, the India Innovation Index attempts to create an extensive framework for evaluation of innovation environment of states and union territories in India. Now, commentaries on the nature of Indian federalism have highlighted that it is a form of cooperative as well as competitive federalism. So basically, by creation of such kind of indices and comparing different states and union territories on these scales, a kind of competition is being generated amongst the state to perform well. And this can be seen as an example of competitive federalism. And this index intends to perform the following 3 functions. Firstly, it aims at ranking of the states and union territories based on their index scores. Secondly, recognizing opportunities and challenges that are faced by these states or union territories. And finally, it aims at assisting in tailoring the government policies to foster innovation. And this India Innovation Index is calculated as the average of the scores of its 2 dimensions. First is enablers and second is performance. Now the enablers include the 5 enabler pillars. These can include human capital, investment, knowledge worker, business environment, safety and legal environment. And the 2 performance pillars include knowledge output and knowledge diffusion. Now the 5 enabler pillars are the factors that underpin innovative capacities of these states. And the performance dimensions capture benefits that a nation derives from such kind of inputs. After this, let us look at the key highlights of the present report that has been released by the Niti Aayog related to this innovation index. So the ranking is done in three categories. First includes the ranking of major states, second includes the ranking of northeast and hill states, and third includes the ranking of union territories and small states. In the first category of major states, Karnataka is occupying the first place and it is followed by Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. In the northeastern and hilly states, Himachal Pradesh has the first place. It is closely followed by Uttarakhand and Manipur. And in the third category, the top performing union territory, Delhi, Chandigarh, and Daman Diu, in that order, are the top performing UTs. So these are few important aspects for us from preliminary examination point of view. You can also quote such kind of indices in the examples related to competitive federalism. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 14 reads that the State Bank of India has done a deal for using SOFR as a benchmark rate. And this further reads that the SBI has executed two interbank short term money market deals with pricing linked to the secured overnight financing rate. And this SOFR is a replacement for the LIBOR that may be phased out by the end of 2021. Now, LIBOR was basically a benchmark interest rate which was used by the banks for lending to each other in short term. And that is why this becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, this LIBOR had faced a scandal a few years back. And because of this scandal, the banks are now moving away from LIBOR towards such SOFR or secured overnight financing rates. So in this regard, let us try and understand what is this LIBOR, what was this scandal all about, and how this LIBOR is important. Now we have already covered this in a previous DNS video, so we will be embedding that video in this particular article so that you understand the basic aspects of LIBOR and the scandal that happened back then. So regarding LIBOR, you should note that it is a benchmark interest rate at which the banks lend money to each other for short term. So simply it is a benchmark interest rate, and this interest rate or the benchmark interest rate is used by the banks for short term money lending. Further, who calculates LIBOR? So this rate is calculated and published every day by the Intercontinental Exchange. And this benchmark interest rate is based on 5 currencies which include the dollar, euro, British pound, the Japanese yen, and the Swiss franc. And for these 5 currencies, 7 different maturities have been defined. And these include overnight maturity period, 1 week maturity, 1, 2, 3, 6, and 12-month maturity. So in this case, it cannot be more than 12 months. Now for each currency, these 7 maturities are defined. And that is why it leads to 35 different LIBOR rates. And these are calculated and reported each business day. So on every date, 35 different LIBOR rates are calculated and reported. And they are 35 in number because there are 5 currencies, and for each currency, 7 different maturity rates are defined. So now let's understand how this LIBOR rate is calculated. Now, since this LIBOR is a benchmark interest rate for lending between two international banks for short term, so now at the start of every day, the Intercontinental Exchange asks major global banks how much they would charge other banks for short term loans. So simply the global banks give their suggestions regarding the interest rate that they would charge for short term loans. And amongst these suggestions which are provided by the banks, the ICE or the Intercontinental Exchange takes out the highest and the lowest figures. And for the remaining rates which have been provided by the banks, it calculates the average. And that is the LIBOR rate for that currency and the maturity period. So for example, there are 5 global banks and they are providing the suggestion for the interest rate that they would charge for other banks. And they will be charging this interest rate for US dollar. So for example, if the first bank provides an interest rate of 10%, the second provides for 8%, third provides for 7%, fifth for 6%, and similarly 5%, etc. Now what happens is that the Intercontinental Exchange discards the first, which is the highest rate, and the lowest rate. and it calculates the LIBOR interest rate by averaging the remaining interest rate suggestions which have been provided by the banks. So this intercontinental exchange discards the highest as well as the lowest interest rates suggested by the global banks. And for remaining, it takes out the average, and that is the benchmark interest rate which has been calculated by the ICX. Now, similar to LIBOR, there are different benchmark interest rates. For example, in Europe, it is known as the Europe Interbank Offered Rate or the Euribor. For Japan or Tokyo, it is the TIBOR, and for India, it is the MIBOR or the Mumbai Interbank Offered Rate. And in India, the MIBOR is calculated every day by the National Stock Exchange of India or the NSEIL. Now, after understanding what is LIBOR benchmark interest rate and how it is calculated, let us understand what is the importance of the LIBOR and what was the scandal that happened in the year 2011. Now, what is the importance of this LIBOR benchmark interest rate? Now, this LIBOR benchmark rate is used by global banks as a base rate for setting interest rates on consumers and corporate loans. Further, it is also used as a base interest rate for floating rate government and corporate bonds. So, for example, the LIBOR interest rate comes out to be 6%. The banks use this interest rate as a base rate and they can set it as 6 plus minus 2% as the rate at which they will lend to their customers or corporate loans. And in case of India, the interest rates on the foreign currency non-resident deposits have been linked to LIBOR by the RBI. Now, how this LIBOR scandal happened? Now, as we have learned earlier that the banks are required to submit the actual interest rates that they are paying or they would expect to pay. However, in 2012, it was found that the banks were falsely inflating or deflating their rates in order to manipulate the market and to earn more profits. So, as we have learned earlier, the banks submit their interest rate suggestions to the ICX, and based on that, the LIBOR calculation is done. However, the banks were manipulating these suggestions and they were not providing the actual interest rates. And by this manipulation, they were trying to earn more profits. And this led to a major financial scam which was known as the LIBOR scandal in 2011. And it is due to this scandal that major banks are now switching away from the LIBOR to other benchmark rates. So regarding the London Interbank Offered Rate, we have learned that it is a benchmark interest rate at which the banks lend their money for short term. Further, it is based on 5 currencies, and for these 5 currencies, 7 maturity periods have been defined, and that is why there are around 35 different LIBOR rates calculated and reported each business day, and these are reported by the Intercontinental Exchange or the ICX. Further, the banks provide suggestions to the ICX, and based on that, it deletes the highest and the lowest figures, and then it calculates the average for the remaining numbers. And that is how the ICX arrives at the LIBOR rate. Now, what happened in 2011 is that the banks were not providing the actual suggestions and they were inflating or deflating their suggestions to earn more profit. And that is why the banks are now moving away from the LIBOR to other benchmark interest rates. And the other equivalents of LIBOR are the Euribor, TIBOR, MIBOR, etc. And as far as India is concerned, the foreign currency non-resident deposits are linked to the LIBOR rate by the RBI. So these are few important facts related to LIBOR. And with this, let's move to the next. Now, this article on page number 6 talks about monetizing or economic counting of the domestic or the household work that is done by women. Now, in this regard, in the DNS of 12th January 2021, we have already discussed various issues related to this particular aspect. And if you had gone through this DNS, you will find that this article was about paying women for domestic and care work is a recognition of their efforts, but may not reduce and redistribute their burden. So in this article, we have already discussed the different aspects of monetizing the domestic and the care work that is done by women in the household. So do go through this DNS of 12 January 2021 to understand this issue in detail, and most of the aspects of this issue have already been covered. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.